Will Freemen, RevolutionaryLifestyleDesign.com, talking to you today about how to play past perfectionism. This is for my perfectionist guys. I myself am a recovering perfectionist, and I can tell you this. There's not one thing that I do that I'm fully satisfied with. I just finished the Life Game course. There's typos in there. There's times where I stumbled over my words. I don't like the lighting. I don't like the lighting in any of these videos. So many things. Take any part of any of my multiple businesses, there's things that I could or should be doing better. That being said, it is a night and day difference from, let's say, 15 years ago. And here's why. I learned to identify primarily as an entrepreneur, and by that, I mean the purpose of my primary existence is to hit targets. And when it comes to net worth and then it comes to income targets, I've got the yearly target and then I've got the decade-long target, and I force myself to live on that and to take those very seriously. So there's all kinds of issues that come up, especially in this business. This is the most difficult one of my businesses because it is a creative business. It is a passion project. And all these different types of things. And I do have an artistic streak. I do have a creative streak. And it's much easier in, let's say, an engineering business to take imperfect action, right? But, you might have a brand as well, or you might have, different businesses, and you're struggling that your business system isn't perfect and your operational system isn't perfect. And you're worried about hiring in the perfect person, or you're worried about putting out the perfect ad or making the perfect cold call sequence, the perfect objection management sequence and all these things. And what happens is you've got a bunch of projects on deck and you either don't start them or you push them off and you procrastinate, and they end up not getting done, and it starts to become overwhelming and weighs on you. And you hear from these videos, from self-improvement, take imperfect action, and it's the right thing to do, but it's just too difficult, especially if you're one of these guys where, your reputation's important. I remember working with a client. He was basically an architect, and he was very worried about the LinkedIn messages and the email messages going out because his name was attached to it, even though these were two strangers who, if they didn't want to do business, he'd never hear from them again. It wouldn't get back to his clients. It wouldn't get back to his friends. It wouldn't get back to anything within his reality, right? So it was no harm, no foul. And it's not like we were saying anything, aggressive or things of that nature. It was just a typical sales pitch. But it was so painful for him, he didn't end up doing it. And I can count a lot of examples of clients I've worked with where this was a real problem, especially ones with brands or in creative businesses, but a lot of people in basically any other business, especially if you're one of these guys that hates being wrong. Like, you hate to do a project and to fail at it, and it feels really bad for you to be wrong, and you beat yourself up, and I should have been perfect on this project, or I should have had the system perfectly set up, and all these different things. So here's the solution, and it's what I personally use. And you can see how to do this in my Life Game course, how to set your yearly targets and your decade-long targets. If you have the right targets that you think are attainable and they're at the high end of your range, right? Like, let's say you're trying to go to your 10K a month to 40K a month, and that's your primary target for the year. And then you've got your physique target, right? Let's say you're 6 feet tall, you want to be 210, six-pack, 50 pounds of muscle. Got a relationship target, you want a high-quality girlfriend, let's say 8 out of 10, 8.5 out of 10, who's loyal. And then you might have, a couple other targets like getting a passport or whatever. But, the importance level is the income, and then the net worth, then the physique, and all these things. So let's say you're setting those targets, and they're linked to your decade-long targets, right? By the end of the decade, you want income of 400K a month profit, right? To go to hit 40K this year and then keep adding all the way up to 400K, right? And you're dead serious about this. Like, it is your primary priority in life outside of your spiritual aspects and making sure your health is on point, you're living for that target, okay? So when you're waking up every day, you should be asking, how am I going to 40K a month? 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 And the only other questions you're asking are, what else do I need to do to get to 210 pounds, okay? But most of those, right? Like, let's say you've got your physique goal, your girl goal, whatever. That should be handled by start of the year. You set your diet, you set your protein intake, and you're hitting the gym 3 times a week, push into fatigue, right? You've got your workout plan in place already. You're not going to tinker and change it around. And you know that if you hit those metrics, you're going there. Maybe you get on TRT. Maybe you want to do a SARMs deal to make sure that you hit it. But that's something you come back to in, let's say, Q3. If you started the plan at Q1, you're like, if Q3 I haven't made enough progress, I will consider the TRT and maybe do a SARMs deal, right? For the women thing, that would be like, you've got a team on Instagram, dating apps or whatever, just pounding messages out, scheduling you 3 dates a week. And, you're doing everything in your power in terms of that kind of output, imagining, okay, if I go on, 150 dates this year and these girls are being screened in advance for my type of girl, I'm going to find the girlfriend, right? So those mostly should be systemized. The one that's going to take the most amount of work is the income goal, right? So those ones would require less questions unless there's a problem, let's say, with your dating system. Then you think, okay, what do I need to do to hit that target, right? And you're putting away your perfectionist fears of, oh man, are these girls going to find out that I message everyone and I messaged one girl the same thing on her Instagram and her friends found out? You're like, nah, I don't care, right? Target. You're not worried about reputation from some girls you don't know when you're sending polite messages, right? Target. Okay? If the SARMs deal comes up, okay, there's the health aspect of that, but if you're not hitting it by Q3, Q4, target, right? Next year, or you could decide that the health risk isn't worth it and you'll settle for, you're not going to hit that goal, and maybe you set a lighter one next year. But ideally, you shouldn't do that. Ideally, you should have a goal that you're setting to get no matter what. So with the income one, right, this is how you get rid of all the perfectionism in business as well as in your net worth, is you're just like, I need to get 40K no matter what. Is this going to get me to 40K, right? And you're like, oh yeah, but the sales system isn't perfect in the cold calling, or, I'm worried about this. Fucking do it. Like, let me get this out there and then I'll worry about optimizing it and converting it later. And it might work just as it is. It might not need to be perfect to work. You don't need a perfect pipe drive system. You don't need a perfect CRM. You don't need any of that when you're dead set on 40K. And every day throughout the business day, you're thinking 40K. So a lot of perfectionism when it comes to any of your income generating or sort of like your net worth hedge can be solved by your money target. I can tell you this with certainty. And the key is setting these decade-long targets, right? And then setting the yearly ones to where they stack up to where you'd be like, oh, I'd be thrilled a decade from now if I'm worth 5-10 million and I'm doing 400K a month. And I'd be thrilled this year if I go from 10K a month to 40K, right? Assuming it's profit. And you're taking those things deadly serious. That's why you're not setting more than 4, 5, 6 goals a year, or to make sure that you've got the time and the energy investment to do them, right? Like, you're not, if it's an aggressive business building year, you're not trying to learn Spanish that year. You're not trying to have a ton of social obligations. You're not trying to do all these different things where you start to have all these projects and time obligations and everything just starts to gather so much weight, and then it makes your perfectionism worse because you're not able to aggressively take on these business projects because you're under stress. And whenever you're under stress, it's going to aggravate that perfectionism, because the perfectionism is you being where you are now, and then you have this standard, and then the self-abuse and the shame starts to come in. And I've seen this with a lot of top performers. Most top performers are coming from a place of self-hatred. They're coming from a high level of shame. They were raised by parents who usually had really high standards for them, or they were somehow bullied or something of that nature in high school. And so then they created an ideal version of themselves that does everything perfectly. And that's a very tough standard to live up to. And I've got more information on how to handle that and remove that from your imaginary audience. But in this scenario, when we're talking about perfectionism, that's usually what it is. It's you having an ideal version of yourself who does everything perfectly. And when you feel like you can't hit that standard, you don't even want to do the thing. And you'll wrestle with it and struggle and look at all these projects and sit there for hours trying to find a way to do it perfectly. And then you look at the time investment, it's not possible, and you're just like, close the computer, can't do it. So the solution to that is to set these targets and take those targets dead seriously and be like, I'm going to be imperfect along the way, but if I hit these targets, I'm going to be thrilled by the end of the year. Okay, I can leave the Spanish perfection alone. I can leave trying to learn cooking or whatever dumb hobby you're trying to do that you're just going to quit anyways. And I can launch all these projects. In fact, I can hire somebody to be a project manager on all these projects, knowing they're going to do it 70% as good as I will, and they're going to fuck a bunch of things up, but the projects are getting done and I'm going towards the target, right? So, in my opinion, if you're an entrepreneur, it's a very difficult situation a lot of times, because now you don't have a boss telling you what to do. You don't have to go into work and just do your thing. And so you have an unlimited abundance of options of things you should be doing. So it's very easy to beat up on yourself in terms of, I should be doing this for marketing, and this and this and this and this and this and all these different things. And you're listening to podcasts and you have these ideas and you're just thinking about all these things you quote unquote have to do and how you're not going to do them at a perfect level, and you end up not doing them, as opposed to hiring someone and just firing it off and knowing that they're going to fuck some of it up, but at least the CRM's getting done. At least the email blast is getting done. At least the calls are going out. And then you can optimize there. But you're not living for a perfect standard anymore. You are living to hit targets. Okay? And by your targets, you will get the result that you want. And then you'll look back 2 years from then and be like, man, why did I care so much about the decal on my website, right? I'm making $70K a month, you know? So the joy that you get from hitting your targets should far outweigh the pain of not doing things perfectly. And eventually, okay, and this is the best part, when you nail those financial targets, you get to put people in place to do things for you. And now your perfectionism is even further removed, because you're like not even hearing about it, right? It's just being done. And that is the key. So you need to, instead of identifying as or aiming to be the perfect man who does things perfectly across the board as your high standard, because it's going to be very hard for you to get rid of those high standards, and those high standards are going to be what leads to your success. Voids create value. So I'm not saying don't get rid of that void and lower your standards. I'm saying instead of the void being for perfectionism on all tasks and projects and things of that nature, no, the void becomes, I have this void, so I'm going to set these great targets for myself in terms of achievement, and the target becomes your boss instead of the perfect initiatives and projects and all these things. No, those just become means to get to the target. And the benefits of hitting target, hitting your goals, will far outweigh the negatives of not doing these various projects well enough, right? Like, you go from 10K a month take home to 40K a month take home. You're not going to give a fuck at the end of the year that your email sequence wasn't perfect and you didn't do perfect follow-up and, you know, your course had some typos, whatever. You're not going to give a fuck. You're going to be like, whatever. At the end of the day, a year later, you don't really care about the stuff anyways, even if it was perfect. And even if it was perfectly done, chances are you're not going to like it in 2 years' time. You'll have different ideas for how it could have been done, or let's say you're doing a video, the technology's changed, whatever. But you're going to be damn happy hitting that 40K. You're going to be happy at 6 feet 210. You're going to be happy with that solid girlfriend you got. And that should be your boss as an entrepreneur, the targets. So I hope that rings true. It's been a huge benefit for me to live and die for targets, and it's helped me move beyond perfectionism, as well as outsourcing the various aspects of my business, so I'm not being triggered by it as much as I would be if I was doing it myself, knowing that things aren't going to be done perhaps at the standard that I want, but even if I was doing them, I'm not doing them at my own standard anyways. But I'm getting much more benefit out of having the actual result. And as an entrepreneur, think about your targets are the boss, right? Everyone else, you're the boss, they're executing your will, but you have a boss too, and it's your targets. And I see a lot of guys setting goals, but not taking them seriously and setting too many goals and not really waking up every day being like, what's going to get me to those goals, and sacrificing everything else that's not. So if you want to see exactly how to do that, pick up my life game course, revolutionarylifestyledesign.com/courses. So it's got a list of maybe 75 decade-long goals, your yearly goals, your projects, how to hit them across all the different, aspects of life, example goals, as well as your example days that you're going to be able to live once you hit those targets, which you need to keep you motivated, right? Like, so you go from 10 to 40K, how's that going to change your life? Oh, okay, you're living in Colombia in a 5K a month penthouse, spending another, let's say 10K a month to live a baller ass life, saving 25K a month, putting it into rental real estate, etc. Picturing your life with your dating prospects and, the ATV rides you're going on in the mountains, etc. That's how you get really inspired for those targets, is when you can see them over a decade, and then you can start to picture your ideal day and sketch it out with all the images and videos needed about the condos you're going to live, who you're going to be dating, etc. So I'll show you how to do all that in the course, as well as really give you the rundown on the life game and learning how to understand yourself and how the world works and all these other things, to prepare you for setting those targets when you're convinced that consistent happiness is the best way to live, and that those targets, those goals, are basically trophies from games that you're trying to play. And playing games within the game of life, and you learn how to see it as a game of life, is what you can do to make your adulthood like a second childhood, and to make it the most enjoyable as possible. And that living in that way is the most intelligent way to live. So if you haven't picked it up, revolutionarylifestyledesign.com/courses. I think it's probably the most important thing you can do to have your decade and your year laid out, because it is your life. And so being super strategic about building out your consistent happiness, in my opinion, is the most important thing you can do. So thank you so much for watching. We'll catch up with you on the next one. God bless.